Welcome back, guys. It's Uncle Steam Reviews, and I am Uncle Steamy, and we are the #1 show on YouTube where we talk about the movies. And we are trending, as always, we are #1, undefeated in terms of YouTube movie reviews. We got a lot going on today, guys. Up top, I want to apologize for not uploading a video last week, but I've been having some troubles. Basically, to fill you guys in, do some housekeeping notes. Amanda, from my last video, my girlfriend in Indonesia, kept asking for more money, and I eventually, I sold my computer, my phone, camera, all different sorts of assets to give her money, and she sort of just took it and ran. That turned out to be a scam. And it really messed me up, you know. I'm still a little heartbroken over it. I've never really felt this way. I miss her. I still love her. And I hope that one day we can be together again. Amanda, if you're watching this. Amanda, I'm not mad. I'm not mad, baby. Just please, come back. I forgive you. So if you're watching this, Amanda, I do love you, and you are the love of my life, so I hope we can work this out. Silver lining is, though, folks, look, I was broke. I needed some money. I just Googled how to get money fast and now. First thing that came up, moneysap.com, and I was able to get a $25,000 loan in minutes, just like that, instantly. So with that money, I was able to get a new computer, a new phone, camera, everything I need to make the show. And I even had some quiche left over. And with that, I got an assistant, which is pretty cool. It's new to the show. And actually, check this out. This is Alexandra. Assistant.
What? Stop ringing that fucking bell. What do you want?
If I could have a cup of tea, please. That would be splendid. Dismissed. I mean, I'm living the dream here, guys. Check this out. She's bringing me tea. I'm giving the... perfect. I do like it a little bit hotter than this. So if you could just remake that, make that again, and...
Fuck you.
Oh, God! Oh, cut the show! Cut the show! We're back. Fuck. We're back. Sorry, guys, for that interruption. But we're back. We're feeling all right. In a little bit of pain, but Alexandra did patch me up. It's very difficult because can't see out of this eye, and I'm actually legally blind out of this eye, so I am struggling. We are recording, right? Okay, today's movies. We have a recommendation from my good friend Daniel Watts with Exorcist 3. Exorcist 3, a 1990 movie directed and written by William Peter Blatty. Now, William Peter Blatty is the guy who wrote the novel for the original Exorcist and the screenplay. Obviously, the original Exorcist, just a classic in terms of the horror genre, iconic and really groundbreaking, especially for its time. Here we have The Exorcist 3. Now, while it's not important that you see the second Exorcist, you should have watched the original by now, and it is helpful to have seen that before venturing into The Exorcist 3. But The Exorcist 3 does tell a very different story, and that story is of Detective William Kinderman, hard-boiled detective whose homicides cases that he's working on start looking more and more familiar. The works of the infamous Gemini Man serial killer. The weird thing is the Gemini Man's been dead for several years. But information that hasn't been leaked to the public, that only the police know about these cases, is showing up in these different homicides. Not only does William Kinderman meet his old friend Damien from the original Exorcist, but perhaps he meets the devil himself. William Peter Blatty seems to be a necessary tool when it comes to any Exorcist movie. He didn't have a hand in the second one, and nobody liked it. I haven't seen the second one, but just reading some reviews, people did not care for it, but people did give some praise to the third Exorcist. And after watching it, I can see why. George C. Scott, who stars in this movie, is phenomenal, as well as infamous character actor Brad Dourif, who also makes an appearance in this film. Two performances that are really just a pleasure to watch. What struck me as very interesting in the third Exorcist is it doesn't really contain a lot of that iconic imagery that you see in the original Exorcist. The vomiting up the green stuff, the contorting bodies, the little girl, and the screaming of profanities. There's actually not a whole lot, if any, of that in the third Exorcist. But what there is some really great camera work, some surreal imagery, and some really, really creepy stuff. While there aren't as many thrills and chills and scares and demonic presence as you think there would be, especially when you compare it to its predecessor, the original Exorcist, there is something pretty haunting about this movie. I left away from it kind of wanting more scares, and then as I lay in bed, I felt actually kind of creeped out by the movie. It has that sort of afterburn effect. I enjoy The Exorcist 3. I think it's a great one to watch. Again, you don't need to have watched the second one. It's pretty much a standalone movie. Watching the first one will help, especially with a lot of the characters. It does refer to the first original Exorcist, so I would recommend watching that if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? The Exorcist is an iconic piece of film. It's a masterwork. I'm going to give The Exorcist 3 a 7 out of 10. Super entertaining, very creepy. Not as iconic or as perfect or as masterful as the original. Whether we should compare the two films is something perhaps up for debate. But I enjoyed it, and I found it to be pretty creepy and scary. Addition to the genre. So 7 out of 10 for The Exorcist 3. And thanks Daniel Watts for that recommendation. Next movie that we have come to you guys is Frankenhooker. Frankenhooker is a 1990 film directed by Frank Henenlotter. This movie was recommended to me by my good friend Geoff Beyrent, aka Colonel Lingus. You can find him at that handle, Colonel Lingus. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but it's silly. It's kind of fun to say, Colonel Lingus. Frankenhooker tells the story of a Jersey guy, Jeff, who is an electric man. He works for the electric company during the day, but during the night, his secret hobbies include bioengineering, and he's a mad scientist, so to speak. And after his fiancée is brutally killed by a superpower lawnmower, which he customizes, he aims to rebuild his dead fiancée by using the body parts of ladies of the night, who he lures in by making a formula of superpower crack cocaine, which, upon intake, explodes the sex workers into a million pieces, which he then gathers to rebuild his dead fiancée. Frankenhooker is a horror comedy B-movie, much like Street Trash, a movie we recently reviewed. I gotta say, Frankenhooker is a pretty cult classic. If you're a big fan of horror movies, you probably have maybe come across this before. It was endorsed and praised by none other than Bill Murray, who said if you see one movie this year, it's got to be Frankenhooker. Of course, he's probably said that in 1990 when the film was released. Frankenhooker is actually really funny. There's a lot of funny parts in it. It does have some good comedy. That's not as fucked up as, say, Street Trash, where Street Trash humor was very dark in a lot of places. Frankenhooker actually keeps it pretty light for the most part. Obviously, you have sex workers consuming crack cocaine and sort of illustrated as, pretty much drug addicts who will do anything for crack, which now that we're in the year of 2020 is perhaps controversial, but nonetheless, it is funny in certain places, even outside of those boundaries. The one thing I do have to say about Frankenhooker is, even though it's funny, it is a B horror movie. And there's nothing really that frightening or even gross or even unnerving about Frankenhooker. When I look at these B horror movies, I kind of want to see, outrageous amounts of gore and blood and cheesy effects like that. Frankenhooker definitely lacks those things. You just kind of see these, what are clearly mannequins being exploded with very cheap explosives. And that's about it. And I guess that's okay. But I really like to see, the really cheesy, over-the-top stuff. Frankenhooker really didn't deliver too much on that angle, but it was a lot of fun nonetheless. Frankenhooker, I'm going to give a 5 out of 10. It is a cult classic. If you are a fan of the horror genre, you may have probably already seen it or have heard of it. And if you're a fan of the horror genre and you haven't seen it, I would recommend you see it just because it is a cult classic. Frankenhooker, 5 out of 10. Alright, and that'll do it for Uncle Skinny Reviews this week. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends and family, and more importantly, don't forget to send those recommendations. As you can see, I will review any movie that you throw my way. And it would appear that mostly you guys are recommending horror movies, and I do like horror movies, so that's not a problem, but I will review outside the genre too. But keep sending those recommendations, and I'll give them a review. Thanks, guys. I had a lot of fun today. We'll be back next week. I gotta go to the hospital. Alex, we gotta go to the hospital. I'm in immense amount of pain. Immense amount of pain. Ah!